I was once a man who believed he knew the weight of the word safety. I would wake up and the world made sense. The sun would rise over my land like a silent promise. The fields responded to work. The sound of the herds was like a gentle choir saying, everything is in its place. There was bread, there was wine, there were people in the house, there was laughter crossing the courtyards. There were children. And when joy resides in the house, we think it will stay. I was known, respected, not for shouting my name, but for living righteously. I feared God, and I shunned evil. I do not say this to boast. I say this because that was exactly when my story began to tear the logic of everyone apart. Because one day, without warning, life turned into something else. It was not like a storm that comes and goes. It was as if the ground had decided to disappear. And the strangest thing is that at first, I didn't even understand that I was entering my own abyss. I only heard running footsteps. I heard agitated voices. I saw a pale face, dust stuck to the skin, the look of someone bearing news too heavy for their chest. He could barely breathe. And then he spoke. He spoke of attack. He spoke of fallen servants. He spoke of theft. He spoke of blood spilled on land that until yesterday was peaceful. The word death entered my house like an animal. And before my mind could finish processing, another messenger arrived. And for the first time, I felt what it is to be pierced by news. It's not just hearing, it's feeling the body react before the soul. He spoke of fire, of the sky, of herds consumed, of the smell of burnt fur, of distant screams, of people trying to save what cannot be saved when fire decides to be king. I remained silent. Silent not because I was strong, silent because I was becoming empty. And then came the third. Invaders, losses, more deaths. And I realized a terrible thing. That sequence wasn't a coincidence. It was as if someone were tearing my life apart piece by piece, slowly enough for me to feel every rip. I looked around and saw my house still standing, my walls still intact, my heart still beating, and yet I began to feel like I was collapsing inside. And then came the last one. The last one didn't arrive screaming. It came like someone who had already lost their voice. He spoke of wind, desert wind. He spoke of a house where my children were gathered. He spoke of laughter, of a table, of a common moment. And then he spoke of the crack, of the wall giving way, of the ceiling falling, of the dust rising like a cloud that extinguishes life. He spoke of the silence after the impact, and I understood. I understood with such cruel clarity that my body couldn't remain standing. My children, all of them, taken at once. What I did next wasn't calculated. It was the instinct of a wounded man. I tore my clothes, I fell. I pressed my face to the ground as if trying to wake from a nightmare by touching the earth. And it was there, with my throat closed, that I said something that didn't come from courage. It came from survival. I said that I came into the world naked and that I would return naked. I said that the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. And I said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." But listen to this honestly. I wasn't singing. I was holding on to a thin rope because everything in me wanted to scream. And I didn't scream that first day because shock has a kind of ice to it. The pain hasn't yet turned into tears. It turns into stone inside the chest. But suffering, it isn't content just taking things. It also comes for your skin. After the loss came my body. An illness took over me. Wounds, an agony that gave no respite. A slow, public, inevitable humiliation. The illness seemed to remind me every minute that I was no longer in control of anything. I ended up in ashes. Ashes, place of disposal, place of rest, place where burned things end. And there I stayed, with a shard in my hands, scraping my own skin, as if I could remove the pain with my nails. I was a whole man, and suddenly I was a reduced man. And when you're reduced, Everyone around you starts to have an opinion. My wife looked at me and I didn't see malice in her. I saw exhaustion. I saw someone who also lost. She said something that many people think but don't say. Do you still maintain your integrity, curse God, and die? I heard, and I understood the temptation hidden in that phrase, to end the conflict with blasphemy, to close the pain with a final blow, to transform the mystery into revolt and call it liberation. But I couldn't do that. I responded that she was speaking like someone without sense. I said, we receive good from God, and shall we not receive adversity as well? And on the outside, that sentence seems firm. But inside, the war began. Because one thing is not to curse. Another thing is not to bleed. And I was bleeding. Not visible blood. Soul blood. I began to wish I had never been born. I began to look at the night and think, why does it still find me alive? I began to feel that I had been placed in a courtroom where I didn't know what the accusation was. And then my friends arrived. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. They saw me from afar and didn't recognize me. They cried out loud. They tore their clothes. They threw dust over their heads. And for 7 days and 7 nights, they sat with me in silence. That silence was the last beautiful thing they gave me for a while. Because when they started talking, the poison came disguised as zeal. They didn't come to embrace me in pain. They came to defend an idea of God. And their idea was hard, clean, too simple for a man in ashes. God is just. If you're suffering like this, you did something. Confess. There is hidden sin. God does not wound the innocent this way. And I heard this like someone receiving a stone in an open wound. Because I was not perfect. But I knew I was not fake. I knew I was not living 2 lives. I knew I did not treat evil as a secret friend, and then wear holiness in public. And yet, everything had collapsed. So I started to respond. And the more I responded, the more I realized that pain does not just want to cry. Pain wants justice. I said, with all the strength I had left, you don't understand. You are turning my suffering into a lesson. You are using me to keep your world organized. Because if you accept that a righteous person can fall without having done anything to deserve it, then you will have to face the terror that life is not a contract. And that is scary. So it's easier to accuse me than to admit the mystery. I said I wanted to talk to God, not with the idea of God, with the living God. I wanted to present my case. I wanted an answer. And I began to discover a dangerous thing inside me. Faith can also turn into despair when God seems distant. I didn't want sermons. I wanted presence. I didn't want ready-made phrases. I wanted the sky to stop being mute. My friends insisted. I insisted. They said, God doesn't make mistakes, so the mistake is yours. I said, if the mistake is mine, show me. They spoke like judges. I spoke like a defendant who doesn't know which crime was committed. And amidst these discussions, my soul began to oscillate between 2 things that seem impossible to carry together. I trusted God, and I felt crushed by Him. I loved justice, and I didn't see justice around me. And then, at some point in this long night, I said something that came from a place deeper than my logic, that I knew my Redeemer lives. I didn't know how to explain it. I had no map. I only had a stubborn hope, small but alive. Because when everything breaks, what remains is what does not depend on what you have lost. And then Elihu appeared, younger, full of words. He was angry with my friends because they accused me without answers. He was angry with me because in my pain, I almost seemed to put God on trial. And he talked a lot. He spoke of God as if trying to hold a storm with sentences. And I listened because I was too weak to disregard any attempt at meaning. But the truth is that no one can give you the answer that only God can give. And I was learning that the hard way. Until it happened. Not an explanation, not an argument.
Why did I not
A presence
die at
happened.
birth?
It came like a
Why
whirlwind,
was I not
like a
still
wind
born?
that doesn't ask for permission, like a voice that cuts through the air and makes the heart remember how small it is. God answered, and that in itself already changed everything, because I had cried out for silence, and the silence ended. But God did not speak in the way I imagined. He did not say, "This is why." He did not give me a list of causes. He did not give me a simple why that fit my pain. He gave me something else. He gave me a vision. He spoke of creation, of the sea, of the stars, of foundations I never saw being laid, of limits I never drew. He asked me, as if tearing apart my illusion of control, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" And I had no answer, because I realized that, without realizing it, I had turned my righteousness into a sort of contract. If I do everything right, life will not break me. And God was showing that He is not a mechanism. He is not an automated reward system. He is sovereignty. He is mystery. He is life that sustains life. And when He spoke of creatures that I do not control, of the weight of the world, of hidden forces, of what is too vast for my hand, I felt something that was not empty humiliation. It was truth. I felt my place. And that place did not destroy me. That place set me free. Because I realized that my pain was not proof that God had ceased to be God. It was proof that I was never God. And I don't say this as cold resignation. I say this as someone who understood. I do not control the meaning of life, but I can surrender to the God who sustains meaning, even when I don't see it. I did not gain answers. I gained God. And that is different. I responded with what I had left. I said I had spoken of what I did not understand. That before I knew God only by hearsay, but now my eyes saw Him, and I fell silent. Not because I turned to stone, but because before such a real God, my accusations turned to dust. And then God turned to my friends. And it wasn't to confirm their accusations, it was to correct them. Because they had spoken much about God, and yet they hadn't spoken rightly about Him. They had used justice as a hammer and forgotten mercy. God asked them to offer a sacrifice and asked me to pray for them, and I prayed. Look at the irony. I, the man in ashes, praying for those who had hurt me with words. But I prayed. Because the pain after the whirlwind was no longer just a wound. It had turned into depth. And then came restoration. Yes, it came. But I need to tell you this the right way, because many people tell this part as if it were a cheap, happy ending. It is not. Nothing replaces a child. Nothing erases the sound of a house falling. Nothing brings back what was lived. Restoration does not erase the scar. Restoration proves that the scar is not the end. God lifted me up. My life was rebuilt. I had possessions again, I had days of peace again, but I was never the man I was before. Because before I had faith as a ground, after I had faith as a journey. Before I thought that glory was in the blessings. After I understood that glory is also in the ability to remain when the blessing disappears. Before I thought God was the guarantee that the world would make sense. Later, I understood that God is the presence that sustains when the world loses its meaning. I am Job. And if you ask me what the greatest lesson was, I won't give you a pretty sentence. I will give you a hard and living truth. Faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is to keep breathing with the question in your mouth, without letting it kill the God inside you. Faith is not comfort. Faith is the courage to go through the night without calling the silence abandonment. And if today you are ashes inside, listening to people explain your pain as if it were simple, I tell you from the most truthful place I know, God is not an explanation. He is presence. And when He answers, many times He doesn't answer with whys. He answers with, I am here. And that changes everything. even if it still hurts, even if there is still something missing, even if life is still under reconstruction, because what sustains a man in the end is not understanding. It's not being alone in the mystery. I prefer this answer.